Sorry, Margaret Mary.
Going live.
Making
What did
assumptions.
you
Right.
say?
You're going live? Okay, fine.
I will send you an invite to my 40th, shall I?
Yes,
Set
please.
in your ways, can't change you now. That was what I said when I hit 40. I'm set in my ways, can't change me now. I'm in my
Yeah,
40s.
yeah.
It was great. It was such an excuse to be myself.
Oh, I love that. I found turning 40, I turned into an absolute teenager again, and I've been there ever since. I was an adult for a decade, and that was plenty.
Yeah,
Right, okay.
absolutely.
So we are live on LinkedIn now. And what I wanted to do was welcome you because it's Thursday, it's 11 o'clock, it's QT Conversations. It's the Qualified Tutor members' opportunity to connect, to ramble, to have honest, heartfelt, authentic conversations. We are very silly, but we try to be appropriate because we are live on LinkedIn. The reason why we go live on LinkedIn is because this then goes into YouTube and it becomes, by next week, it will magically also become on Spotify as our podcast. So here you are on a podcast today. The reason why I sort of articulate all of that is because I really want to frame your mind to what I want to achieve in this conversation. This conversation has quite a lot of thought percolating behind it. I want to talk about the difficult things in tutoring, and I want to do it in a way that is upbeat. Um, the reason why I want to do that is because there's so many itches that we don't scratch, little niggly bits that we never get a chance to talk about in our own subject and in our own systems, because we know as tutors we have two brains on. We have our business brain on, and we have our subject brain on, our educator's brain on, always with the student in the center, always with the commitment to being that tutor that the student really needs. But there are bits, aren't there? There are difficult topics that are difficult to cover, topics that your students are most reluctant to cover, areas such as invoicing as well, the system side of things. Maybe it's interacting with parents that you find most difficult. Most conversations don't go here. And certainly most CPD doesn't start here. And that's because you have to feel safe to go there. Um, it's much, much easier to talk about best practice than it is to chart a course from where you are actually right now to what best practice would be. But as you know, with your students, if you don't check in with what they do and don't know, with how they feel about their learning, then you can't move them forward. You just, never. It's not personalized. So in order to guide your CPD today, I thought what we would do is explore some of the difficult things. And I'd like to go around the room initially and just pull on those things. And Katie, I can see that you're sighing deeply. Does that mean that you've got something on your mind that I can pull on first? Be warned, I do read faces. So you're up.
No, I just started thinking about reflecting on the week. That was all.
Good, tell us.
Um, yeah, I mean, nothing. I guess in terms of the, the hard, the hardest lessons are lessons where students aren't engaged, or aren't excited about the material. For me, it's not necessarily a topic per se. Obviously, with the lessons being online, there are some topics which you kind of think this would be a lot easier in person. Um, and I guess difficulties I tend to come across are when there's a lot of pressure from parents, and I'm sort of being directed by parents, whereas I kind of have my own idea of what needs to be done. And that can be really frustrating because I know what needs to be done, but I'm kind of getting pushed in another direction or overly overwhelmed.
So that was beautiful. We have a long legacy in this room of talking about the balance between parents' input and our own professional autonomy, and knowing how to politely tell them to. Yeah, we read your lips, Helen. It's actually that you wouldn't tell your consultant or your lawyer or your accountant how to do their job, and that once they take us seriously as professionals, they should behave in the same appropriate ways. So we always have to communicate effectively with them. We always have to be that trustworthy person with the authority, and also be open to their input. Because yes, they know their students best, their children best. You're not going to be one of those people who's like, I care about your child more than you do now because, I'm the professional. It's not that. It's not that. But a little bit of back off and trust me is appropriate. You also mentioned lack of engagement, and I think that's really, really important as well. And I would love to know whether there are patterns in your subject about where the lack of engagement tends to fall, which subjects or novels are the most tricky.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I definitely the topics I'm more enthusiastic about, they tend to be more enthusiastic about. I've
I wonder
noticed
how
that.
that happens. But
So
that's
I
well
do try and
done.
address it.
Well done, because that's really honest, right? So if without dropping your favorites, you could elevate the ones that you feel less excited about, do you think that you would be improving engagement over there?
Absolutely,
With your
yeah,
permission, can I push you slightly further then?
yeah.
Okay. So the
Okay.
bits that you're not comfortable with or passionate or excited to teach, what's the pattern there? What's holding you back from those subjects?
It's, I mean, it would just be, I mean, so my love is, with the Key Stage 3 science, for instance, I really love biology. So I get that. And I also really love the history of chemistry. So these two topics, I'm just like, all in, and it's very easy to, be knowledgeable and this, that, and the other. But then there are other topics that I just know I'm less interested in. And so I need to do the extra work to kind of make it more exciting for a Key Stage 3 student. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah.
And I'm assuming that you can't share the curriculum with somebody um, who would complement with passions on the other subjects. It's one child and one curriculum and one exam. Is that right?
I mean, yeah. So usually at that age, I'm teaching maths and also and science. So kind of four mini topics. And yeah, I mean, this year I did a whole topic on mathematical patterns in nature. So I am sort of mixing it up and coming up with new ideas, but I just need to kind of keep on top of that.
So that's really cool. So you're saying by mixing it up for yourself, you're hoping that your students will, it'll overspill into them as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and also just to, I mean, the cross curricular learning, I think is really important. These are high achieving students as well, so I've got that width to kind of go and plan more creative lessons, and so it wouldn't necessarily be the same for everybody. But yeah, it's something. Sorry.
No, I'm just giving MJ a wave.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think it just makes it more applicable as well. Because often when you're teaching maths to young students, they're sort of like, well, what's the point of this? So, just bringing a load of really cool applications to science, I think can help.
I love it. Okay, we've finished the session. I'm going now. Bye. Because obviously, when you mix it up and you boost your own passion and you go cross curricular and you make it applied and relevant, so many of the difficult bits in the subject and beyond start making sense. Margaret Mary, where are you up to? Well done, Katie.
I'm I was going to say I don't try and make it interesting for them at all, actually. I, I don't.
Stuff them. Just tell them to sit still.
No, I have older students. Most of mine are A level. I have GCSE students who are, they want to get good grades in the exam. And interestingly, as a teacher in the classroom, it wasn't all about the grades, but I am well aware that the reason these students come into me now is because they want to get grades to get on to the next step. So that's what I'm helping them with. I would say if I'm going to make it interesting, sometimes
Oh no,
we
hold on. Dial back. We're not
not
talking about how
interested.
to make things interesting. We're talking about what's
Right,
difficult for
okay.
you. Yeah. I'm
What's
happy to have that
difficult?
conversation as well, but I really want to stay at
Right.
this uncomfortable place. Sorry.
No, that's fine. For me, the topics that are difficult, they largely fall into two areas in the chemistry with A level. It's either the maths-based topics, particularly buffers, but mole calculations to start with, and if they haven't got them, then there's no way they're going to get buffers in year 13. So maths-based topics or organic chemistry. And with organic chemistry, there's a lot of lateral thinking. And I think how I deal with that is to give them a system, give them a template, give them a flow diagram, a process. This is how we work through this. So it's a combination of, yeah, you can go through the presentation, but the presentation is kind of a discussion with everything. Ultimately, if they're going to apply that, what I will do is give them a summary or a process or, something. Yeah, basically. But something that they can refer to, just to make it less bewildering. I think it's bewildering. And it's like, okay, here's the system, especially with the organic chemistry. It took me till second year at university, no, end of first year at university to have a system for learning organic chemistry so I could apply it. And it's like they're getting that right from the get-go. Here's the system. This is how you do well in this, and it's lateral thinking. So I think it's being. I'm really aware of metacognition, thinking about thinking. How do we think about this? How do we think about this? And to give them the shortcuts because they're engaged in something that's completely bewildering. It's like they don't know where to start. So that's what how I deal with it with them.
It's
Here's a
wonderful.
system. Here's where you start. And to do it with them until they can do it themselves, basically.
If I had a child to give you, I'd give them to you right now. You got the job.
Thanks.
Because it's so credible what you've just described, but also that word bewildering is really powerful because of the empathy that's sitting behind it. So we're going on to Emma now because she wanted to talk about big words. Margaret Mary, I am going to slightly call you out because you told me what's difficult for the students. We haven't yet talked about what's difficult for you, so we're going to come back to that. Okay.
I thought it was about this because it says topic for tomorrow. What are the toughest topics in your subject?
So see what happens when I give too much information at the beginning.
Sight blinded me here. I was like,
I say it's Julia. It's going to go off the rails into some other delightful subject.
You're right. Margaret Mary, you're absolutely right. My bad. Emma, go for it.
So Katie talked about like when we find things difficult to teach, like that's where the students find things difficult. I find the opposite.
Yeah.
So when they come to us and they're like, I can't do algebra, and I'm like that's not it. I find it easy to teach, but they don't like doing it. So you end up with like a clash there. But actually, by the time you've finished, they feel different. So it depends on where they are in that journey.
Okay, hold on. So there's two things.
Hard topic.
I'm not clear whether you've just spoken about the curse of the expert, which is algebra is so comfortable for me. I don't get why it's not comfortable for you.
No, that's not.
Or is it that they're coming with baggage and you need to
They're coming with baggage. So when you say what topics are difficult in your subject, for students, 9 times out of 10, they'll come to me and say algebra. If you ask them that on session 1, they'd say algebra. But on session 20, they'd give you a different answer.
What were they saying on session 20?
They wouldn't say algebra anymore because we'd have spent time on algebra and building their confidence up, and they'd love algebra now. Or at least they'd be able to say something like, it's not as bad, or it's not as scary, or those sort of comments.
Okay, so where does scary come from?
The fear of the unknown, I think, a lot of the time with algebra, because they've never seen it before. They've never, they've done numbers since they were little, so they think they've always known numbers. They don't remember learning numbers, whereas algebra feels new to them.
So when we complain that they bring algebra in too early in year 6, is that true? I mean, would you argue the opposite? Helen, I'm coming to you next.
I have mixed feelings on it. I think if the child isn't ready, they shouldn't bring it in. There are some children that are ready for algebra in year 6, but there are some children that are not because they still don't understand number. So you throw algebra in, and the way I teach algebra is you treat it like you treat numbers. If you don't know how to treat numbers, then you don't know how to treat algebra. Therefore, it's got to come back to personalized learning.
And now Julia's thinking about how numbers relate to algebra.
Yeah, but I think I understood what she meant. Helen, go on.
Well, I'm kind of on the same.
Guys,
Yeah, there are some children that can't handle algebra because they haven't understood how it relates.
Katie, I'm so
number.
outnumbered around here.
Sorry.
Find more English tutors. It's just painful. Come on.
We've just entered D as another maths tutor, so
I
we're
know. I
definitely
should
in the
let her
majority
in.
here. So yeah, in that sense, I think potentially with primary school, we've got a lot of non-specialists trying to teach maths, so they don't necessarily get the bigger picture of where it's going.
So true.
What they're teaching with number bonds to 20 to 10 to how the fraction work all relates in then to the algebra, which is just a generalized version of the number. If they're not comfortable with and I can say this, hold on, no, we are on LinkedIn. My year 5 is currently starting algebra. She's quite mathematically able, unsurprisingly, with me as a mum. But I'm just getting the impression that there is a nervousness from the teacher in delivering it because it's not their specialism. And at primary school, you just don't have it. So then you hit
goodness me. Primary school's impossible. All of a sudden, you're doing geography and history. I don't know anything about geography and history. I don't know how you want me to teach it.
Well, geography is colouring in between the lines, but that's a whole different conversation where mathematicians mock geographers. There's a lot of maths in geography when you go further. Anyway, so when they hit year 7 and then they've got a specialist, someone, and even then it might not be a specialist in the same way. They are a maths teacher focusing on the maths, but they might be science trained. They could be coming in from another background as well. It's just trying to get that understanding is missing. And so much of GCSE maths is algebra, especially if you go up.
Okay, so really simply then, without any difficult words, are you saying that the places that we struggle is where we're not specialists? So Margaret Mary's scaffold, her process was coming from her second year of her degree, where she cracked, what was it? I know,
Organic chemistry.
Organic chemistry, thank you. And I'm so out of my depth. So the point is that the young people get the benefit of your higher learning and your specialism, and that's why we can talk about tutors as being like consultants, whereas a class teacher, certainly in primary school, could be compared to a GP.
And they do an amazing job. Just
100%.
We're not slating the teachers that do that job. They have an amazing job to do. And I couldn't do a primary school job because there's no way that you get me teaching English, because I could just about do noun, verb, and adjective, but anything more and I am stuffed.
So this really resonates for me, because in primary, you won't be surprised to hear my kids had more English lessons than anything else. And when I compensated by trying to teach maths, Rena, my 15-year-old who Helen's tutoring at the moment, will tell you that I'm a terrible maths teacher because I get it, but I don't get it well enough to explain it. And I can see that I can't break things down into small enough pieces that I don't lose them somewhere along the way. And I feel bad because I see it happening every time. Well, I don't do it anymore, but that's definitely what it felt like for me. Dee, just to catch you up, we are, as Margaret Mary kindly reminded me, talking about the difficult parts of our subjects to teach and reflecting on why that might be and how we might help ourselves. Helen, was there anything else that because you responded to Emma, but you didn't tell us? Should I tell them the other reason why I announced this topic?
Yeah, go on.
Go on, you tell it.
So as Julia has just said, I am working with her 15-year-old towards GCSE maths in the summer. We have a WhatsApp group, and Rena will text me the topic that she wants to cover and let me know what we want to cover. The last 3 weeks, Rena has picked, probably in my opinion, the most horrible GCSE maths topics known to man.
Anyone want to guess what they were?
Go on, Emma.
Go on, Emma.
Transformations, constructions. Did you say there were 3?
I think it's 3.
Maybe plans and elevations, something like that.
Probability. Completing
No,
the square.
probability. Lovely.
We've had
MJ?
transformations and reflections. We've had our transformations. We've had our graph transformations because we're higher tier. I think we had Venn diagrams and probability in there. And so when Rena texts me, I go, "Ugh, you've picked a yucky one today."
And she very wisely says, well, that's what we're doing here, isn't it? We need to cover the difficult things together.
And this week she texted me one and went, yes, not yucky. When we were doing bounds, but it's become a thing now between Rena and me. And actually it works really well because I think it's an honesty thing that I don't like those topics, and understanding that actually it's okay not to like all of maths. Transformations suck. They are a horrible topic.
Why?
They're just conceptual. It's just
And
it's
they're completely useless. Why?
Oh,
Why?
that goes back to Katie's point about relevance.
Don't get us started
Why?
on topics of GCSE maths that are useless. We'd probably come up with a very long list. But yeah, I think it's okay to say to a student, yeah, this isn't my favourite one to teach. I know how, and reassure them that we can do it, but it's okay to say this. It's okay not to enjoy this one. It's not.
But I tell you what she does enjoy. She's gone from set 4 to set 3 to set 2. And she doesn't have any time to go up to set 1 because GCSE's in a minute. But the teacher let her sit in the set 1 lesson because she'd finished marking her paper. So she went and sat in it in that group today, and she was like so pleased with herself. A Silver has never stepped into a set 1 in maths
yet. Let's go growth mindset here, shall we?
Love it. Right, MJ, we've not heard from you yet, and Dee, I'm coming to you next. What are the difficult topics to teach and why?
Quantitative chemistry.
I feel like this is confession. Come on.
Well, it depends on the student. I've just started teaching A level, but I'm only teaching it to students that I know from GCSE. They've followed me through, so I wouldn't like to do it. So I hear what you say, Margaret, Mary. Oh, sorry, because I don't like it if I get my name wrong. Yeah, there are 3 areas in science: vocabulary with biology, chemistry if you don't understand the periodic table, and then they can't do the quantitative, all the molar calculations, concentrations, etc. And then physics, it's the formula. And for me, it links back to what you're saying about maths, especially with the physics. I do some maths tuition, not a lot, but I find that a lot of the maths syllabus is not relevant compared to everyday life. Why do we really need the quadratic equation unless you're going to go and do it
Helen
further
wants
on?
to tell you. We'll do that in the second half, Helen.
But you jump into with algebra, and then it carries through to physics, especially. It's a lot of you've been used to using numbers, and then sorry, all of a sudden you've got letters. And what are they for? Why have we got letters? Why is it ABC?
Dear maths, I loved you so much more before you hooked up with the alphabet.
Yeah, exactly. And then my other thing is, which I emailed, is that so many students are just not getting to see practicals.
Yes, you mentioned that in the chat. Tell me more.
So I'm in Kent, so it's either grammar school or it's non-selective. What's been happening, I've noticed over the last few years that even within grammar schools, they're not getting to do the practicals themselves. They might get away with a demonstration, and then they've got no hope as if it's in a non-selective. So if I'm teaching them, I make sure, obviously all I can do is a YouTube clip, But I mean, there are a set of required practicals that these kids just don't do. And
Okay, so this is a new, nobody's mentioned this yet. You all seem to have been leaning towards the abstract things. Sorry, that's Moxie's face hovering over the camera there. You you seem to be you seem to be saying mostly that it's the abstract things that are difficult to teach and difficult for students. But MJ's actually saying the opposite. She's saying that practicals are different because they haven't been given that practical experience. So our students are struggling because on the one hand, the abstract is out there hovering and intimidating. And on the other hand, the practicals aren't accessible to them. Does that sound right, Margaret Mary?
Yes.
And
I noticed during the pandemic, so I went back for a term and a half. The third lockdown, I wasn't there, but that term we were back. What was really noticeable when the year 11 sat their mock and the year 10 sat exams was they hadn't had that implicit learning that they got with actually doing practical in the lab. So they didn't know, or the questions on what piece of apparatus would you use to measure the mass of something, they didn't know. They didn't know how to do it. And it's
my
stuff
son
like
was that year. Yeah.
You just go, oh, I haven't noticed kids getting these questions wrong before. We recognize that in school, that this is because they haven't been doing practical. And even that first term, they couldn't do practical because there was still all the COVID restrictions. And I noticed that I picked up an A-level student recently. I think she's retaking, so she's like having a gap year. And she made a comment the other day, well, we didn't do any practicals in A-level. And I'm like, what about your practical endorsement? And I was really shocked, and it must have shown on my face. I said, well, what about the practical endorsement? How did the school sign you off for that? And basically said they showed us practicals, and I'm just like, oh my God.
So that's what MJ's saying as well, is it?
Yeah, and to me that's quite shocking because none of the schools I've worked in would have dreamed of that. It was practical was really important. And even in terms of managing a class, actually, if you had a practical, that was big leverage. A chemistry experiment, that was big leverage. And it was just like, your energy's not right, we're not doing the practical. They were terrified of me pulling the practical. So that idea that, yeah, there are schools out
I'm really
there
scared of you now that you've said that.
Why?
Well, between that and the I don't make lessons fun, I'm like, oh.
I don't.
You're one of those.
Well, you know, I when I left my first school, I've been at 22 years. Apparently, the deputy head asked the kids what they thought of me, and he said in his speech that he got two responses. They were either in awe or they were absolutely terrified. There was nothing in between, and I was like, yeah, I'll take that.
I'll take that.
I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that. That's okay. But that
Emma can relate.
there are schools who are not doing practicals. I'm speaking from a chemistry point of view, and that is evident when you're tutoring kids. And to me, that's criminal because they're not fulfilling the responsibility to the kids. It's a practical subject. And I think what's happened post-COVID has been an easy get out for some of them, or we'll just demonstrate it. Sure, there are some you have to demonstrate because the kids can't use chemicals that are hazardous, but they should be doing practical where possible. And yeah, that is not happening. And they're missing out on something quite important. Because you can know how to make an ester, but it doesn't mean to say you can make an ester without actually trying it.
Right. I remember they were talking about, what's that, MJ?
It's just the lack of practicals, and they haven't come back. What I'm saying is, but you had COVID, there weren't the practicals, there were the demonstrations, but now we've got the facility to be able to do it. They're not coming back, and I think it might be partly because of budget, but there's just not the exposure and the engagements that the kids are getting by doing the practicals.
That's really, really
I
helpful.
do agree. I think also some of it might be about discipline. And I think this is a mistake because I know some teachers have gone, oh, the discipline's not good, so we can't do a practical, rather than going, this actually gives me the leverage, you know, you
And
behave,
also-
we do practicals.
And your behavior isn't good because you're not engaged, and practicals are more engaging. So rather than reducing the frequency of them, we should be increasing them. Get them more excited about it.
Yeah, and you point out this is really dangerous, so I'm trusting you with this, and you give them big responsibility.
Yeah, year
I'm
sevens,
trusting you with this, and they go, oh, okay, okay. And you know, this is a really dangerous practical, so you've got to be on the ball. That's always how I approached it. And whenever I gave them something dangerous, they behaved better. The more dangerous it was, the better they behaved, because they were terrified.
No, so you're gonna
Isn't that part of it also being relevant as well? Linking it back to the maths, like science in the real world is experiments. That is science. So if you're trying to teach science without science, it doesn't work. It becomes harder to teach.
This is what's occurring to me. There's like a misunderstanding here. So you would never teach food tech with demos. Yeah, you have to actually cook the meal in order to know that you know how to cook the meal. This is hold on. On one side, I see both of your faces. I see that. On the other hand, for me, when I was going through I did chemistry A level, though you'd never know it. I thought science was how things work. Certainly my kids in primary school learn that science is how things work, but you're talking about science in a different way, which is exploring how things work, finding out more, taking it to the next level of how things work. So on the one hand, I feel like we've sort of lost track between the abstract and the practical, and that seems to be the pattern in what we're all talking about. Emma, Helen, what were your faces saying?
They try and teach food tech without them cooking.
So then why do we go down the road to get the ingredients every week? What's happening to those?
That's not in every school, the same as the science isn't in every school.
I'd say that's the one I see the kids doing. And as I walk in, I messaged you the other day.
Yeah.
As I was walking into school, and they were doing, and it's such an annoying thing because you walk past the food tech rooms, and you get
it smells good
of whatever it is they're cooking. But yeah, not every school has come back and doing them. The practical element is more it's always more challenging to manage, and because balls in the air.
Right. So my awesome 12-year-old that some of you have now met in person is waiting for a place at a highly practical school. We visited again this week, and every child has their own path, and everything that they do is entirely hands-on. And when they need to sit down and write things down, the teachers empathize with how difficult that can be. Let's talk about inclusion for a second. Dee, we haven't heard from you at all. I'm going to park my question. Go ahead.
The only comment that popped into my head talking about science practicals was giving kids the opportunity to do experiments that go wrong. Because science is mostly about learning from things that don't go right.
Has anybody seen Moana 2? We watched it yesterday.
Loads of my students have, but I haven't.
Well, there's a fabulous science engineering nerd in there. And she says, what does she say, Emma?
I can't remember what quote is.
Something like, there's only design, fail, and then you die. That's
cool.
I think Edison had a slightly more upbeat version of it. It's only 2,000 failures to make the light bulb, or whatever that quote is.
Yeah. Try, fail, try again, fail better.
Fail better, fail forward.
I can't remember. I can't remember who said that. I quoted it a while back and actually attributed the quote, but I can't remember who said it. But
Okay.
As one person I know said recently, I like making mistakes. I learn from them.
Well, to be perfectly honest, with nearly all of the physics experiments, especially with electricity, they never worked. So
I think we're coming back to perfectionism. But I think we're coming back to we can't.
But it doesn't matter.
I've just got my head
exactly. It doesn't matter. What's that?
I'm just thinking Harry Potter. If anyone's seen any or read any of the books where the potions lessons are going on, the amount of times that they screw those up and end up blowing their eyebrows off, or turning their hair blue or whatever else is going on. And usually Snape comes around and smacks them around the back of the head, which is not appropriate. But you watch effectively what is a chemistry lesson.
Yeah.
Harry Potter world, and they make mistakes.
Brilliant.
Things go wrong.
Brilliant. Margaret Mary's going to tell us about Buffy now as well, isn't she?
No.
No. I feel like you could do the McGonagall face though.
Oh no, she's quite strict. Well, I was quite strict as well, I suppose.
So what about perfectionism then? Maybe that's the thread. So something about the subjects that are difficult are the ones that we don't know that we're going to be able to cope with. And that fear of the unknown that someone said earlier is what looms and creates tension for the student. And that falls onto the teacher and back and forth and back and forth. And it's really because we don't know that we're not supposed to be getting things right. Dee, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I had a student yesterday wanted some work on 3D trigonometry.
You sound very sad as you say that. I have no idea what it means.
And it's tricky because you've got a two-dimensional representation on paper of a three-dimensional object, and you then have to interpret the question. You've got to try and draw on it to make sense of it. And the more we drew on it, the worse it got, until we started pulling triangles or tried to put triangles out of this to try and make sense of it. Now, this student, like me, struggles with anything to do with visualization. When we did transformations, nightmare. When we were doing, this was the student I had the issue with doing the, is it rotations? And we eventually found some online stuff that would work. And I was feeling stressed because I couldn't see how to do the question. And she was getting stressed because she didn't want to draw the triangles. And she doesn't like working in bit paper either, but that's a whole other story.
No, it's not. Those are all different layers of tension. It's really interesting what you've just described.
And we got there, and I'm just trying to. She's a reluctant writer down of working stuff.
That's how they say it in the, yeah. That's a scientific term.
Write it down of working.
Is one of the tensions then?
Go on.
Is one of the tensions not having a wide base of tools for some of these topics? That
Absolutely.
We don't
on,
like
Katie.
teaching are the ones we go, I've got one method and that's it.
Go on, Katie.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about the 3D trig because I've tried to teach that online, and it can be, yeah, it's the kind of thing that you really want to be doing physically, like, oh, let's build this and let's, sort of, I don't know, in an ideal world, that would be the best way to learn it because you'd actually understand the real life application of it. But trying to teach any sort of spatial awareness topic online, I struggle with.
So Helen's suggesting that you might want to do straw modelling. Does that mean you do it in your house and they do it in their house?
Well, so yeah, if they can't picture it on the screen, then grab a selection of straws, kebab sticks, anything that can make a straight line, and then you can make your cuboid, and you can then put in the.
You do like a Blue Peter type jobby with them.
Yeah, here's one I made earlier. But you can get them. I mean, it takes a bit longer to get them to make it, or you could send a quick. Here's one to prep earlier. Could you make this out of straws? Then you can sort of see where that triangle is. It's a lot more visual to put the things in. It's so much harder to do that without being able to turn the shape around and
the only thing I can relate it to, again, because I really don't know what you're talking about, is parking. If you gave me a book or some instructions about parallel parking, I wouldn't get to the end of them. But I'm quite good. I'm actually quite good at parallel parking. And
I can't do it at all.
Well, because I have no sensors on my car whatsoever because it was made before wheels. So but it has 8 seats, so I'm stuck with it. So yeah. So something about practical. Now, based on Helen's suggestion just now, I want to see if we can get a little bit CPD-ish in this conversation now by asking you how you might be able to take on those difficult things, whether they're the practicals or whether they're the algebras. I know we love algebra, calm down. What can you do to improve your repertoire, do whatever it is that you need to do to get them to take those difficult subjects and turn them into strengths? Going around
Step one, time dilation device.
No, I'm not having it. I'm not having it. You can't wait around for a time dilation device. This is inefficient.
Need to thank Georgina a bit more.
You guys are Larry today. It's because we're talking about your subjects. Come on.
You do have to find the time somehow in there. It is, and it's an investment. I might not say that those topics will ever be my strengths, because algebra and other bits of maths they are really strong, and I've got lots of tools. But finding time to invest in how else could I teach this? What else could I approach this with? How else do I support this student?
Okay.
But
I'm going to ask an Odette-ish question then. What one thing will you do to help yourself tackle, what did you say was difficult? Oh, all the yucky subject. Oh, Rena. Oh, okay, got it. So what are you going to do to tackle Rena?
Rena isn't difficult. I'd just like to point that out, though. I'm not saying that Rena is difficult.
We know, we love her. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I'm going to go find new ways of doing those topics. Actually,
Great.
even when she says the yucky ones, they're not that yucky. I just play up to it slightly.
We know. Dee, what's your one thing?
Ask nerdier people than me for help. That's why I'm in Helen's Maths Hub. That's why I'm in the Maths and Science channel on WhatsApp.
Yes.
That's why I go to Johnny Hall's Maths Fuddles.
Yes.
You missed a good one the other night.
I'm sure I did.
Sorry.
Good is a relative term in this context. Katie and I had a chat earlier, and she said about something, I hope you don't mind my saying, about stabbing in the dark. And I'm like, there's no more stabbing in the dark. You're in good company now. You just asked someone. Emma, what one thing are you going to do to help you? Which bit were you scared of? Nothing.
Yeah, no, topic-wise, not really.
Okay.
But if there is something, it's the collaboration, it's the asking other people, it's not being scared to just say, how are you teaching this? And being curious, even when I'm fairly confident with my subject. Like, there are times where I'm like, oh, I'm bored of doing it this way. There's got to be another way, and just being curious about it.
Love that. So healthy. And I think that was probably the purpose of this conversation. Margaret Mary?
I don't know. In terms of the content, I'm okay with the chemistry content, and I'm got a lot of experience about what students find difficult. I think more of it is I have this student who has a particular difficulty, so then I have to go, okay, how do I help that student? And I suppose that's the one place that I don't have every strategy for every student, but I don't know what strategies I don't have until I come across a student I don't have a strategy for. So I can say that I've this blind student that I have this year that I'm tutoring online, I did strategies for dealing with a blind student until I had to deal with a blind student.
Yeah.
And another girl who's now coming to my home who's got dyscalculia and dyslexia. That's quite challenging because A-level chemistry's not easy if you've got those issues.
Good for her. That's really brave. So how can you prepare for the unknown?
Well, I have some understanding of what these learning barriers are, and I have some strategies to help overcome them, but I don't know if they're going to help her. So the conversation, I've only had one lesson with it, and the conversation with her is, I have these ideas, but they might not work for you.
Yeah.
You know, you might not know what works for you, but what you actually need to do is tell me this doesn't work for me, and we'll find that out together. So to actually give her the space, and I know that was one thing she was very grateful for, was feeling that she could say. I think actually the one lesson that I pulled out highlighters, I got a big box of like highlighters. And I think her eyes lit up when she said that, and she said, "Oh, I brought mine." She had this big, so that I don't know what I don't know yet. I think, and but I'm not afraid to have the conversation with the student. I think it's one thing I've learned from tutoring, to be unafraid, not to feel awkward about it, or that, because I think I learned this from my blind student, because we get uncomfortable when people got a disability, because we're just like, oh, we don't want to put our foot in it. We don't want to be insensitive. We don't want to be clumsy, and we're afraid of that. That doesn't help the student. So I think that is the one difficulty I've had to overcome this last year, and is to ask the student, talk to the student about what works for them and what doesn't.
Beautiful.
You know, and I think that's important, because they've got to have the space to say, because they're so polite, they won't say unless you say, no, you must tell me this, because I don't know if you don't tell me.
And it's so similar to what Emma said about being curious, but the fearlessness that sits behind being curious is really something, isn't it? In the SEND course that I have nearly finished, the model that I've sort of conjured up is observe, recognize, adapt, and as much time focusing on the observation side of things and just noticing what's this going on with this child. And then you recognize and make connections with what you might have seen in the past, or what you might know about various labels, and only then to make adaptations. But exactly as you're saying, to stay open. Thank you so much. That's really helpful to what works for you, for this child. MJ, what are your takeaways in terms of what you can do to make the difficult bits of, well, you've been talking about practicals, to make them better?
Well, I think I need to ask somebody else as well, but I try to emphasize I mean, it's unbelievable if I put something like a distillation experiment on bit paper or whatever it is. Have you seen this? No. Do you know what that's called? So try and, sort of introduce it as much as possible. And if they haven't seen it, I send a video clip. I won't sit through and watch the video with them, because that's a waste of their money. So yeah, I'm very aware. That's all I can say, that they're not doing it. Margaret Mary, something just like alkali metals. They've not seen that demonstration.
Okay, hold on.
They don't. This is what really frustrates me. I get quite angry about it. But I don't want
to interrupt you, MJ, but we're wrapping up this conversation, and I don't want to start with angry now. But I would love to suggest that actually, if you double-barreled named people could go off and have a meeting together on this subject, that might be a really practical takeaway. So if Mary Jane and Margaret Mary go, book in, and feel free to use the chat to put a double-barreled first names. Is that not a thing?
Well, no, because D is a double barreler as well.
Oh, double-barrel first names. Very good. Feel free to interrupt me at any point. I'll just, pick up your distraction and let the conversation wander off for a bit. Anyway, basically, I think you should have that conversation. I think that should be your takeaway. Mary Jane, does that sound helpful to you?
Yes.
Great. Katie, last, and you were first, so you're going to round us off now. What are your takeaways? I feel like we really explored lots of the things that you opened us up with.
Yeah, I think being just not being afraid to try a trial and error approach. I think until you get the right sort of pedagogical style that works for the student, and kind of like a fluid approach. Things are constantly changing. We know that right now more than ever. And I think just, certainly from my perspective, just trying to expose myself to as many different things as possible. And a lot of that I do then apply to my teaching, and I continue to think about it.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds right to me. Or we have had conversations in the past about how we feel guilty doing a trial and error approach when we're charging by the hour. And Mary Jane, referred back to that in terms of watching the YouTube video, and, it's a waste of their money and stuff. So we always feel like we're sort of putting ourselves on the spot to deliver and nail it every time. But part of nailing it is being responsive. And like you said, being fluid with your approach. So I'm going to be honest and tell you that this was difficult for me. I found this conversation difficult because I am not a subject specialist anymore in anything but tutoring. So all I can talk with you about is this thing that we do in this room, and it is such a joy to hear you guys nerding out on your special subjects. And I think we always know that it's the passion that comes across, and that was definitely what happened in this conversation. So 2 thumbs up to you guys for being those people and being those educators. I hope that this conversation, and also for people who are listening, helped with the fearlessness, with the everybody has something left to learn, and the better educated you are, the more you understand how much more there is to learn, which Stephen Fry said at the beginning of BET, that being educated means knowing how much more there is to learn. So here we are in this room doing more of that. It's always a joy. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Mary Jane. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Margaret Mary. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.